everyone, to the Ignite CDA board meeting for February. If you please rise and help me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Do we have any public comment? Now is the time for some public comment. Please come forward, state your name and address. Yes, please. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Nicole Cummings. I'm with the Riverstone Master Association Board, which is made up of a large group of businesses within the development. We've had some concerns that were expressed to us about the Bear Waterfront project. So I'm here to just kind of express some of those concerns and represent everybody's best interest down there in the development. Initially, we had opposed the project, and I'm sure you guys have received some letters stating that. So John Stone and Rob Bloom had a conversation yesterday. They were able to reach an agreement on a few points, so I just wanted that on the record. And as long as those points are agreed to and adhered to, I think that we will approve it and support it as it is. By way of background, the Master Association donated a 14,000 square foot piece of land to the Trail Foundation, with the caveat that it will be strictly used for the benefit of the trail users, and it prohibits any public or private development on that strip of land that we donated. I have a copy of the warranty deed that we entered into with the Trail Foundation to give you guys today if you want. This is relevant to the proposed realignment of the trail where it crosses BB Boulevard right there. Bear Waterfront also promised that it will work with the Trail Foundation to realign the trail, and it should be carefully reconsidered, and the safety of its users should take priority. Bear Waterfront also had agreed to take an inventory of the existing trees in that area. We request that they hire an arborist to consult the URA and the developer on which trees can be safely removed, if any. But it's our understanding that little to no trees will be removed in that area as of now. The developer has also agreed that there will be no structures placed on the BNSF right-of-way property other than the Area A, I think it is, towards the west of their proposal. A few residential garages will be placed there, and we had agreed to that. We request that they do a traffic study update in that area. Even though parking will be added on Tilford Lane, there should be adherence to a 100-foot setback from BB Boulevard that allows sight lines so that the trail users can be aware of when traffic's crossing that area right there. The trail user safety should be of paramount concern here and not just selling off the Ignite parcel. All of the proposals put that issue front and center, but none of them directly address the root problem, which are there are too many vehicles down in that area right now and not enough parking. So the more that restaurants and housing gets added, we see that problem expanding. And the donated piece of land we think is perfect for additional parking, so we'd like to see that extend from Tilford Lane entrance down to the current lot where the parking lot is for the park. Regarding the overlook areas mentioned in the proposal, we think that's a great idea. John Mueller has some guidelines and some guidance on that, so we'd like those followed. Our main concern, again, is the protection of the trees and the intentions of our donated piece of property. Lastly, and this is separate from the conversation with Rob, this is a request for you guys. In light of the fact that Riverstone has contributed roughly $500 million to the Urban Renewal District in tax increment, we would like to request that Ignite will use $200,000 out of the money that you guys get from the sale of the property and put it towards the park and pond in order to maintain a quality venue for the public. We would like to see expanded seating, and the Arts and Cultural Alliance, Ali Shute, has been trying to raise money to put a canopy over the stage for the bands and provide shading for the public that sits right there in the amphitheater. So we'd like to see some of the funds go to that. The park's been there for about 14 years now, and we feel like it needs a revamp. Lastly, we've had a 20-year relationship with you guys, and we feel that Riverstone has been a success story, and so we hope that you'll approve this request and make sure that the developers adhere to those guidelines.
Sounds great. Just a second.
Just a comment for clarification. The railroad right-of-way property that's in question is located in the Lake
If you
District.
take your mask down, we can.
Can you hear me better? Just for clarification, the railroad property that the board is thinking of selling is in the Lake District, and what Ms. Cummings is referring to for the Park and Pond is in the River District. So funds can't cross those lines.
They can't be used in different districts. Okay. Okay. Well, maybe we can follow up with a discussion after, and we can come to an understanding. Do you guys have any money left in the River District at all? So, okay, well, that'll be a conversation for another day, but we would like to discuss that further with you.
Good, thanks, Nicole.
Okay, you're
Any
welcome.
questions or comments for Nicole?
I think a number of people would like to see that canopy, so
Oh, yeah.
there might be other ways to do something, so.
Yeah, the bands have gotten really popular down there, and we had the Kelly Hughes band down there last year, and it was just packed. And a lot of the bands don't want to. They've turned down our proposals to perform there because they call that a heat something, but this direct sunlight just makes it really hot for them. So.
Any comments or questions from our online board members?
Oh, thank you.
And for me, thanks.
All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Great.
Any other public comment?
Hi, my name is Steve Nemick. I'm here on behalf of the Bellerive HOA. I'm the vice president on the board there, and we just wanted to reaffirm our support for the Bear proposal. It was created with support of numerous stakeholders. We'll preserve the trees. So I think we've sent in some emails, and we've also sent in some letters, and just wanted to reaffirm our support. Thank you.
All righty, thank you. There's probably no other public comment because there's nobody else.
Steve, I didn't catch your last name. Nemick, thank you.
Got her. Next on the agenda is the time to consider the consent calendar.
I move that we approve the consent calendar for the month of February.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? The payables are quite large this time. They're over 2 million because that's our twice yearly payments for our debts and stuff. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Time for reports. The ad hoc committee for the Riverstone, Bellerive, Tilford Lane RFPs has met twice. The committee consisted of Mayor Widmeyer, Mick Arman, and myself. We've had 2 meetings since our last board meeting. The first meeting we met at Welchcomer, and it's a very complicated piece of little property, and we've had at least 16 stakeholder inputs coming in, so thanks everybody for that. I love the input. But we wanted to meet and ask Phil to make sure that we knew all of the complication and stuff down there. There's sewer lines and water lines and trail foundation little pieces, and it's a very complex little piece of property, and we have to get this project done relatively quickly. And so the second meeting we met then, and that was a public meeting because we wanted to bring not information but a recommendation to the board. And from that ad hoc committee, then the recommendation was to accept the Bear waterfront proposal. Anything else for the ad hoc committee members?
No, not for me. I actually thought we did a very deep discussion about it, and they pretty much graded out the highest of the 2 proposals.
Again, I really appreciate the stakeholder feedback. That's valuable. Is the mayor online?
Yes, Scott, I'm here.
I didn't know if you wanted to add anything or giving you an opportunity to speak.
No, I think we got a lot of great feedback, and we took that into consideration, and I think we came up with a proposal that's the best for everybody.
Agreed. So then I'll need a motion then.
I would make a motion that we accept the Bear waterfront offer sale of the I guess it's the railroad right-of-way in Riverstone. And that we work with staff and in the continuation of the ad hoc committee to get this proposal to fruition.
I'll second. This is Brennan.
Thanks, Brennan. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. That motion carries. Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Mick and Steve, for your hard work. And now I'm going to ask you two to stay on that ad hoc committee and work with Tony and Danielle to finalize the A&Es and the DDAs then and get that project rolling. And then we'll, at that time, it'd be a great time to consider all of the stuff that Nicole was talking about. Make sure that that's all.
I agree.
Next up, parking, Commissioner Jordan.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of things. We had a fairly short parking meeting last week. It was a Zoom meeting with some technical issues. Anyway, the items we discussed, they're working on some signage and wayfinding, and we're looking at some various suppliers that could provide the signs for us. We're aware of what the city street department can do, and they have some limitations, and we're looking at some other possible providers. The other thing, that windstorm we had several weeks ago that knocked the power out, that brought some things to light with our parking structures, particularly the one on Coeur d'Alene Avenue. And so we're looking at some possible solutions for some backup power, maybe a combination of battery backup lighting in there and some battery backup power for the cross-arm and ticket machines. And as far as the numbers for revenue, I think Commissioner Chapkus may have that with him.
You're on
If
mute,
he's there.
Jim.
I didn't bring the revenue numbers with me,
okay.
Brad.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to set you up. I apologize.
You did set me up.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. No
Okay,
worries.
next month.
Next month.
Okay. Is that it?
Okay.
Thank you, two. Next up is the Executive Director's Report.
Thank you,
Tony.
Mr. Chairman. Jeff, could you power up Phil's presentation that he put on the tabletop there?
Jeff.
He's working on it.
Coming.
So it would be Phil's presentation, not that one, Jeff, I'm sorry. It's the one Phil Boyd put on. I think is it a PowerPoint, Phil? Yeah. There it is, yep, that's the one. Thank you. Fine work. Okay, thank you. So I bring forward today the draft RFP for the next Atlas offering involving areas 5 and 8. As you see on the screen, area 8 is on the western edge of the project site, and area 5 is on kind of the southeast portion of the project site. The key elements of these proposals, the RFP for area 8 will be to offer a total of 24 shovel-ready, single-family platted residential lots. Now, the proposals can include an offer for all 24 lots or groups of 4 lots as depicted in the graphic. So you see in the graphic 8, there's block A through A, B, C, D, E, and F. So if the proposals can be a proposal for 4 lots, 8 lots, 12 lots, 16 lots, and 24 lots, all the way up. So we'll see what we get from the market on that front. And then for area 5 is divided into 2 portions, 5A and 5B. Potential uses on this area are townhomes, multifamily, mixed use, and potential cottages. developers can propose on 5A, which would be the western part of the area, or 5B, which would be the eastern part of the area. They can propose individually or jointly. Area 5A will have a minimum specified commercial and retail area that may include both indoor and outdoor areas, so that the western part of the area is looked to be activated to have some type of retail space. The proposed timeline for the RFP is that if the board approves the RFP to move forward, we would release it at the end of this month. Developers would have the time to submit proposals to due by the end of March. Proposals would be selected by the end of April. And then for Area 8, the due diligence time frame for the 24 single-family lots would be 30 days with a close within 120 to 180 days. In Area 5, which is a little more complicated, the due diligence time frame would be 60 days and close by December of 2021. So that is kind of a synopsis of the RFPs, and I think Council Quaid has a comment to make on the RFP structure as she was kind of working through the legal documents.
So there's a fair amount of complexity related to the differences between area. Okay, is that better? So there's a fair amount of complexity between Area 8 and Area 5, just in terms of the difference in uses, as well as complexity related to, you know, how, if we go with this 4-lot approach, depending on what kind of responses we receive, 4 to 12 lots, we are planning to have them enter into a non-negotiable DDA right at the time that they submit their proposal. And as we were working through the RFP, Ben and Matt have done a great job on putting it together, and all the information is there, but it's confusing as to what you need to submit based on what area you're proposing on and what type of project you're proposing on and how many lots you're proposing on. So I suggested that we split it into 2 separate RFPs so that we have one just related to Area 5 because the projects are so different, and then have one related to Area 8. And Area 8 is still going to have a little bit of complexity in it because if it's under 12 lots, they'll do that non-negotiable RFP or DDA, and if it's more, they'll do our standard process. But I think it'll be a lot easier for developers to track, and I don't think that very many developers are going to be proposing on both just because of the differences in the type of project. I mean, it's possible, but I expect that it's going to be different folks. So having them just focus on an RFP on the section that they're actually proposing on, I think will be simpler. And I think it'll be easier for us then to evaluate.
Sure. It's a good idea.
I agree, good idea.
Yeah, the selection criteria would be huge if you were trying to do it for both, so yeah.
So with that, we'd stand for any questions you have on the RFP, and we would, if the board is comfortable with this approach, we'd look for a motion to go ahead and give us the green light to go ahead and put a final product together and issue it by the end of the month.
Tony, one quick question. What would you say what the closing was on Area 8?
Area 8, we're thinking 120 to 180 days, depending on what type of offerings we get.
Right.
If it's
From the
easy
end
or
of April.
complex.
That's why I was curious, the way you were looking at the DDA differences, if that would make a difference in the closing times.
The way that we
Negotiable versus non-negotiable.
Right. So the way that we set it up, anything from 4 to 12 lots would have an automatic closing period of 120 days for 4, 150 days for 8, or 180 days for 8 plus. So we would still look to put in the DDA, even if someone proposed on all of Area 8, we would still look to have them be through the DDA process and ready to close in 6 months.
Sure.
So it's going to be a short timeline even on the standard DDA process, but the standard DDA process just gives, there's more input back and forth between the agency and the developer in terms of the design, and we just felt that if they were offering on more than half of the lots in Area 8, we would want that
Right.
back and forth ability.
Perfect. Well, I'd make a motion that we accept the proposal to start the RFP process for areas 5 and 8.
I'll second that.
Was that Brad or Jim?
I think that was Jim.
This is Jim.
Brad has a question, though.
Go ahead.
So on Area 8, if, for instance, some or all of that area didn't have a proposal, does that mean it could go on the open market then, kind of like the Park Drive lots?
No, because we're not selling at surplus. We would have to go through
Okay.
the surplus process if we were going to then list it on the open market.
So if we didn't sell all of it, we'd have to re-RFP it again? Is that what would happen?
We could choose to do that, or we could choose to just use the surplus process and sell it to the highest bidder. It's just then we have no control over what lands there.
Right, okay. Well, I like the way you did this. I think if you're trying to get top market value, then making it as simple and straightforward as possible is good. So,
I agree.
yeah, thank you.
Did a good job.
Infrastructure should be all in place then? So, any further
It's a
discussion or
great-
questions?
It's a great time to sell lots right now.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next on the list is the Atlas Project, Project Area 13, DDA status and direction moving forward. So as background for this agenda item, as you recall, the developer to Chase Mixis submitted a proposal for Area 13 that the board accepted last year. Over the course of the past several months, the Atlas Project team, which is comprised of myself, Danielle, Phil Boyd, Matt Anderson, and Ben Wharton from Heartland, has been working with the developer to bring their proposal to the DDA contractual phase. To that end, Ignite and the city agreed to modify certain site PUD issues to help the developer obtain a successful project. There has been a continuing issue with the developer's willingness to engage on the 5,000 square feet plus or minus of retail space that they initially proposed for Area 13. The developer's most recent overture regarding the amount and timing of retail space has altered substantially. The Atlas Project team does not think the recently proposed level of retail space nor timing thereof is acceptable due to the unique location of Area 13 and the overall vision of the Atlas Project. In other words, to make Area 13 a vibrant, activated interface for the neighborhoods and community. The Atlas Project team developed a solution for Area 13 that should make the project successful given the developer's proposed use of residential condos on the east end of the site. The developer was asked to provide a response to the solution by February 15th and be willing to sign a DDA by February 26th. Ignite CDA and the developer are still quite a bit apart from agreed upon solution for Area 13, specifically pertaining to the retail space element. The Atlas Project team is seeking board guidance as to either one, direct staff and the consultant team to continue to work with the developer on Area 13 solution, or two, set a hard date, for example, February 26th, for the developer to commit to the Ignite Area 13 solution and sign the DDA, or the agency will end the A&E process with the developer and look to release Area 13 in a future RFP. I would like now to turn the discussion over to Matt Anderson and Ben Wharton of Heartland, who are joining the board meeting via Zoom to continue the conversation and their input to the board on this issue. Matt, are you there?
Well, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thanks, Tony. And Ben, feel free to jump in here as we tag team this. The slide up on the screen now, are you gonna, somebody have control of that? Can't quite see that. If you advance it one, I think it's the next one, no?
Yeah, Jeff, it's the same PowerPoint. It'll be the next slide.
So we put this together, just a simple exhibit to kind of illustrate the differences between the initial proposal for Area 13 and the latest version to come back from the developer. The project has changed substantially, but as Tony says, it's still a whole lot less retail than we had initially bargained for this area. So it started out in April as 3 mixed-use buildings. It is now down to a single condo building and a second standalone retail building. The number of units went from 24 to 30, somewhere in that range. It's now 21. The retail square footage was 5,000, and now it is proposed to be about 3,000 square feet combined between the two standalone and mixed-use buildings. There was a lot of discussion, as you may have seen in the materials, about the timing of the retail. We're sympathetic to the challenge of retail these days, for sure. There's no question, it's hard. And tried to accommodate that through the process of giving extensions to allow the pre-leasing of the standalone retail, but we haven't been able to come to an agreement on the terms and conditions for that that are acceptable to the developer, or in our minds really meets the objectives that Ignite has had from the get-go on the project, which is that this is the front door living room of Atlas, and to leave open the possibility of having just 500 square feet of retail in that location doesn't really meet that vision and the plan for the project. We did amend the PUD, and we don't have to walk through all of these in general, but as Tony said, feel like Phil and Danielle and the team with Hillary's input really went the distance to create a very efficient opportunity to build on this project, consistent with what we were told the developer wanted to do and what we believe will, in time, be viable in the market. And we quickly processed the PUD changes to make that possible. So we kind of feel like we've teed this opportunity up for success, but still very far apart in terms of actual proposal. Ben, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that was a good summary. I guess I would add, just in terms of like deal structure, Matt listed all the accommodations that, you know, Phil and Hillary and Danielle sort of spelled out. It's spelled out right here at the PUD amendments. But the option structure, which I think you read about in the email that Tony sent around, was an important factor as well, which gives the developer additional flexibility, you know, should during their development timeframe they don't find a suitable tenant for the standalone building. So that was just an additional accommodation that we made to try to make a deal work with this group, who, as a reminder, is developing on areas 10 and 12. And, you know, we view them as a strategic partner at Atlas. And so we've been doing everything we can to try to keep this one together. It's just such a critical area, as Matt said, and the retail all the way along, we've communicated that's important and we need it here. So here we are.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
Phil, this might be for you, but it might be for Matt or Ben. So obviously, Area 13 was a major portion of the retail space for this entire development. Where else, I know there's a little bit of retail on 5, potential retail on Area 5. Where else is there potential retail space on the entire project? Perfect.
So the red squares that you see here represent the retail. So as Ben and Matt mentioned, what the PUD says needs to be here is 3,500 square feet here, 1,500 square feet here, 1,500 square feet on the corner of Area 5A, 500 square feet on the corner of 4, which is right down here, and then 1,000 square feet over here. So those are the, we'll call it commitments, that the master developer, Ignite, has made in exchange for the deviations that the city gave us through the PUD. Did that capture it, Commissioner?
It does. Okay. So now on 13, so we're going to shrink that from 5,000 square feet to 3,000?
That's the developer's proposal.
I realize that.
Yeah.
I guess where I'm going with this, Phil, is that we have a very limited amount of retail space in the entire development. And to give up, 2/5 of the space on that site, it starts to feel like we're going to get pinched a little bit.
I think that's the same way the team was feeling, the staff team was feeling about it.
Okay.
I missed one other thing, I missed a spot. Up here on Area 11, there's the opportunity for 40,000 square feet.
On Saltese.
On Saltese, yeah. This area up here, which is Pit 2, that's the parcel that still has the opportunity to put a box of retail, commercial.
That really kind of sets outside the development, though.
Yes, but I wanted to make sure I was
I
complete.
know, I understand that. I'm just trying to think of the retail. I mean, a lot of vibrancy of a project like this is to have something other than just housing. And I'm feeling like we're giving up a lot of that, and it's just going to be a housing development if we don't continue to be a little bit steadfast on having retail at various points in there, to give it that energy.
Yep.
So personally, I would not back off too much on Area 13. If they don't want to commit to it, I would rather rebid it and find somebody that is willing to commit to it.
I agree with Mick. I would like to direct the staff and consultant to continue to work with the developer with a hard date of February 26th to come to some type of compromise. I think there's been plenty of accommodation so far.
Thanks, Jim. Commissioner English?
Yeah, when I think back to some of our original, I mean, there was a whole lot more red on the map of the retail commercial opportunities. And I mean, we've really gone backwards on that. That Area 13 used to be, it was more of a minor spot. Well, it was going to be a very important, we're going to have our on-the-water restaurant, if I recall, and some of that. And yeah, I wouldn't agree with going back an inch on that. In fact, I'd rather see us, well, we probably can't go backwards on anything else, but if there's any chance to maximize it, of course, we are getting and the council, we're getting, input on a lot of different things about, comp plan and all of that, and the community and where we want to be, and, people want to have more of a complete little, kind of minor community with some opportunities for things. So, I guess my sense is if they want to go back anymore, I would really question if their heart is really in that anyway, and we'd be better off to go with somebody that's what they really want to do. So, yeah, I wouldn't support going backwards.
Thanks, Dan. Any other comment or questions?
Yeah, this is
Chairman?
Brennan.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, just two comments. I would
Okay.
agree with what's been said before. That's really an anchor for the sense of place and bringing the community into the area right by the park. And I'd also like to see us not kind of lose that with 1,000 cuts. I guess a process question, if we were to reissue a new RFP, would we change that in any way, or are we obligated, if others have similar concerns about the retail prospects in the short term, do we issue an RFP and just make sure we get what we want and keep issuing it until we do? Or are we obligated to actually sell if we issue an RFP? Or does it make sense to do it with 5 because they're, I think, across from each other, right?
I would ask Matt to respond to that, because some of the initial Heartland coaching on this was kind of the gem of the project area, and that maybe we should bring this in later than earlier in the project sequencing. But due to the Lake District's closing, we brought it on earlier than we had initially anticipated to. But we can carve this piece of property out of the Lake District after it terminates and manage it and keep it part of the project, so that the timing issue may be better served in a later time, and I'll let Matt speak to that.
Yeah, so the challenge in these circumstances is rooftops. So the retail in these places always comes last, because retailers need people living in close proximity to make a go of it the day they open. So that's one of the reasons, that and this the general challenges of retail, this is even pre-COVID, were the reasons why we suggested it should happen later in the process. So with the feedback and the changes that have been made to the PUD, as illustrated on this slide, we feel like it's about as efficient and well thought through as it can be, and that holding it back and reissuing an RFP later, it's just going to get more interest as the community is further along. We have discussed the concept of going out at the same time as Area 5. We were inclined to not put it out immediately. That would be like the RFP at the end of this month. To wait a little bit and see how the responses came in on 5, particularly at that streetscape level, and see what that proposal was, and just get more feedback as to where it wants to be, and then potentially put Area 13 into another RFP later in the year when more information is available.
Okay, thanks. Makes sense.
Any other comment? Brad?
Mr. Chair, well, I agree with everyone else. I don't blame the developer for asking and trying. They're looking at what can absorb into the market the fastest and easiest, so I don't blame them, but I think it's really important to hold the line here, so I'm all for re-RFPing it if they can't come to an agreement. I wish everybody well. Hopefully we can work something out, but I'd hold the line and re-RFP it.
Was that a motion, Brad?
If you can put it into one.
Sure.
I can do that if you'd like.
Yeah, my motion would be whatever that option was that you mentioned. We had a couple options to give the team until the 26th of February to satisfactorily negotiate this, and if they can't, then we'll just send it to a RFP again at a future date. But go ahead and hold the line on with the retail.
I'd second that.
Thanks. Any moved and seconded? Any further discussion?
Can I make a clarification? So would we have to have the DDA executed by that date? Because I'm a little worried about being the holdup on that.
Okay, so what should we do on the time frame?
How do you want to handle that, Tony? I mean, frankly, it depends on their counsel as well. You know, I mean, from the time that we get if we reach a deal, I would say we would need probably 2 business weeks just to be safe, that we could, I mean, I don't want them to hold us up. But if we can reach a deal with them, it's still going to take some time to document it and to go back and forth between me and their counsel.
Daniel,
would it be February 26th to successfully reach a deal? Would that be the time frame? Then you get 2 or 3 weeks for the legal work?
If Tony's comfortable with that. I mean, I'll move it as fast as I can, but.
Well, I'm asking.
Yeah, that's fine. So the motion would read to shoot for the February 26th for the developer to commit to the Ignite CDA solution per the PUD requirements for retail, and as proposed, as you see on the screen, with a DDA closing by
2 weeks later.
Okay, with DDA closing 2 weeks later. Is that acceptable to the board members?
It's acceptable.
So it looks like our meeting next month would be the 17th.
Any further discussion or questions?
So would we know prior to our meeting next month? I mean, would we have it done prior to that? I'm just asking.
I think the DDA then would have to be executed by the 12th.
Of March?
Yes. March 12th.
Okay, I was just curious. If that's too tight, it's fine. I guess one way or the other, we'll know if we reached a deal by the next meeting, and then we can take action one way or the other.
Well, the way the motion reads now, we'll take action before that. They either commit to the February 26th timeframe to the solution that we discussed and DDA closing by March 12th, or we'll come back to the board seeking when to re-RFP the Area 13.
Correct.
Right. Sounds good to me. That's okay with you?
Do you want to reread the motion then, so everybody's...
It's a little rough. Motion by Commissioner Jordan, second by Commissioner Arman, to adhere to the February 26, 2021 date for the developer to commit to the Ignite CDA solution per the PUD regarding the concept layout as well as retail space, with the DDA closing no later than March 12th.
And the commit to is what is in
The PUD would be 5,000 square feet.
Right. 24 to 30 residential units?
21 residential units.
What about the timing for delivery of the residential, or I mean, the retail?
Good question.
What's
Ben or
typical?
Matt, do you have any thoughts on that?
You mean completed with a tenant? What do you mean by delivery?
In our last discussion, we had discussed to create more time for them to, look for the right tenant for the space for the standalone retail building, that they would have to commence construction on the retail portion 6 months after starting construction on the mixed use building. I think that's right.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
A quick question. Assuming this goes along, and then for some reason they can't make that time frame on the commercial, what's the legal recourse on this? They would own
The idea would
property.
be that we wouldn't transfer that second parcel to them. So in the event that they couldn't proceed with that timeline, we just wouldn't transfer it to them, and we would re-RFP the retail pad.
The
Okay.
retail pad, which is the western part of the graphic that you see, let's see if I can highlight it here. This is a retail.
The two other boxes on the eastern side, those are apartments, or are those going to be hotel type of product?
The current proposal is that there's 21 condominium units in here, so for sale product, underground parking, and then the developer was proposing 500 square feet of retail. We're, I guess, countering with 1,500 square feet of retail. And just a little point of clarity for the board, one of the ideas that came out of this in order to retain the ability to, we'll say, not transfer this retail piece immediately, is when we were doing the PUD and we had to submit a new subdivision plat because we pulled in the triangle piece, the team decided that we would split this parcel. So we actually have the ability to create two separate parcels here. And so as part of the deal structure that Ben was mentioning, the idea would be you transfer this piece, and then later on, when they're ready to start, you can transfer this piece. If something falls apart, the Ignite can just still owns this piece, and so you don't have to transfer it. So that's why that property line exists there. Okay.
That's good.
Is everybody ready to vote on this? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next on the agenda is the Atlas Project update. Mr. Phil Boyd.
Thank you, Tony, Chairman Hoskins, and board members. So you noticed that your packet was relatively thick this time. There's a lot of action items in there, and we just thought it was prudent to feed you as much information ahead of time because there's a fair amount of detail to consider. I'm going to cover the entry monument signage, just give you an update on that. The Phase 1 change order, which I presented last month, not for action. Today it's for action. The Phase 2 and 3 design and plating action item. We're going to talk about a shared use path relocation and adding some diagonal parking on Atlas Road, and then the neighborhood development standards, which is the combination of two sets of standards. Now, you remember us talking about development standards, and that's essentially land use and where the building sits within a parcel. The board authorized adding architectural standards. So now what do the buildings look like? And we'll talk about putting those together into one set of neighborhood development standards. So the update on the waterfront signage, this is Dell's most recent sketch to try to incorporate some of the commentary he heard from the board. It's just a progress, one that he did quickly, which is amazing to me that he does these quickly. But you see the river rock that we heard about. I think the logo still has some color work to be done ultimately, and these screen panels are the old version that I think there was some comment on that. He's also working on the actual structural parts of it, which is a big part of it. The board had mentioned their concern about if there was any wood in it, the longevity of that, and so this is an all steel and concrete and rock structure. So this is just they're kind of work in progress. You guys remember these. That's his sketch, and here's where they're actually starting to put together. They're sizing the foundations and the plinth blocks down here and kind of getting the shape to make sure they can achieve the sight distances. This is at the Suzanne crossing. So the sight distance is a big concern for us, being able to see through there. So the next item is change order 1. And just to refresh the board's memory, up to this point, when we were doing phase 0 of the park, the board had allocated a budget to that, and the city was administering that project. So if there was a change order item, Bill Greenwood would consider it. If it was in the budget, Bill and would authorize it, and it would just get moved forward. And we just had the white lines of staying within the budget that the board had allocated for it. When we moved into the upland development phase, and the city's really no longer involved in that, the master developer, which is Ignite, is involved with it, the city transferred the contract from themselves to Ignite. So now, if there's a change order, we need to bring it forward to you to make sure that that's what you want us to do. So last month, I presented it informally to you. This month, it's the formal one. You saw the level of detail in the packet that goes into those things, because we track these things on a quantity basis. There's two big items, or two parts to this one. Right now, the thing that you would be acting on would be change order number 2. And you can see there's a portion of it that's funded by the developers through their A&E DDA. It's for the water and sewer services. And then there's the Ignite total down here. So the total that is in the change order is 91,000, but your share is 59,000. There's another item that'll occur in the future when we do what's called the balancing change order, which is $40,000 for raising Veneer Road. And I think I gave you guys a detailed description of that last time, so I won't hit it again unless you want me to. And so my purpose of showing you both the 40,000 here that's going to be in the future and the 91,000 here is to kind of give you a feeling of where you're at in the overall $2.4 million infrastructure project that you currently have underway. So this would be an action item for the board to consider. If you have any questions, I'm glad to address those.
So Phil, the existing asphalt and tree removal, where is that located at?
It was right up here. So there, and I know all of us have been on the site before, you remember there was a road that went right up through here and continued on up to the office up in here.
Okay. That's where that's at.
Yeah, and so in the process, so that road and whatnot was on Area 10, but it was quite a bit up in the air. It was like this. Area 10 was relatively flat, and then it bumped up, and here was this road. And so, as you guys know, before the triangle piece came into play, I was scrapping for every piece of structural soil I could find in order to not have to import material from off-site. So I eyed this material up here, but it was under a paved road, and there were some trees in the way. So the idea was to pull that pavement off to it, take the trees down, get to that structural soil. So that structural soil came from here down into here. And even with this change order item here, that $16,000, we were still money ahead and not having to import soils from off-site. And that was kind of the calculation we did at the time. Any other questions?
I move we accept change order number 2.
Mick
I'll
made a
second.
motion.
Second?
Moved and seconded to accept change order number 2. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. Motion carries. Okay. Moving on, the next one is the next big lift on finishing out the design and platting of the rest of the development. And so this was in your packet as well. We've broke this into 3 phases. So phase 2A, which is area 5 down here, which you just authorized the RFP for, these lots don't technically, they exist as a block, but you couldn't go sell them because this road here and this road here have not been designed or approved by the city. The road in front of them has been, and Suzanne has been, but not all around it. So this needs to have the infrastructure designed and approved by the city and the plat finalized depending on the configuration of the successful developer. So if a developer comes in and says, gosh, I want to build a gigantic condominium building here, I say gigantic, not more than 45 feet tall, this could be one big block. If he comes in and says, I want to build 32 townhomes in here, it would be 32 lots. That is the phase 2A of our proposed scope of work to the board. The next big part of it is phase 2B, which, as you guys remember, there's a boatload of earthwork in here in order to reshape, take the end off the triangle piece, mine pit 1 out, all material in there, and then create the water, sewer, road, storm, electrical, I think I got them all, infrastructure in here. And this design work needs to be done again before Ignite can sell those properties. So that's phase 2B. Phase 3, I have it as kind of a to be determined. And the reason it's to be determined is because we still need to figure out exactly how we're going to process the material up on Mount Hink. And we don't want to be having people live down here if we're processing materials up here. So it's complicated enough that I had to put it in a flow chart for you guys so you could see the proposed kind of steps and the sequencing of time. So if the board authorizes our amendment today, we would start working on the design. We would do a preliminary design of the whole rest of this development, which would be quite nice because we've been designing a little bit in pieces prior to here, where we designed the park and we didn't know exactly what phase 1 was going to look like. Then we got authorized to do phase 1, but we don't know exactly what phase 2 was going to look like. Now we get to design, assuming the work is authorized, all of this in one big fell swoop. And so we'll be able to stop things from moving, which will be very refreshing. So we'll get through preliminary design, and then we would move into phase 2A immediately, so we can meet the time frame for designing, getting city permits, CDs, and have area 5 ready for lot closing. We would then move into phase 2B as a separate piece of work and move through that. So again, we're kind of matching the time frame for the RFP associated with that one. And then phase 3, I just have a to be determined over there as a based on Mount Hink. So in the packet I gave you, you guys have the contract and a few other statistics in there that I thought would be useful for the board to consider, where you're looking at how much real estate you're generating revenue on. Off the top of my head, I think it was 13 million. We estimate that the construction cost to build all of these improvements out here, not including the pit remediation, is about 3.8 million. And our fee for doing the engineering work and the platting is $395,500. The reason that I don't have the estimate on the pit remediation cost here is because we're still working through the soils. We've done the soils excavations, we've got the data from La Riviere, and we're now in the process of figuring out exactly what we can salvage from there and whatnot. So this is the second action item for the board's consideration, is authorizing Welch-Comer Amendment number 20. I'm glad to answer any questions on that.
Phil, what was the number again, the total cost of infrastructure?
3.8 million is the estimated cost for building the infrastructure. And engineering cost? 395,500.
So we're looking at about 4.2 total.
And then we would add in the pit remediation up here, which is about, the current estimate, Commissioner Arman, is 1.2 million. But I've got the estimate pretty high up here because I'm being conservative, because I don't know enough. I anticipate that number will come down, but I wanted to be conservative. So you're about 6 million.
So what's the timing on the need for funds for all of this?
So the first piece of, the first piece would be paying the engineering bills initially, which those are kind of progressive as you go over this time here. Then the second big one would be to build the infrastructure here if the developer on 5A pushes the issue. So remember, once you have a permitted set of construction plans, the city will allow you to bond for the improvements, and we can go issue building permits, provided there's water, sewer, and base rock in here. But this might, if this developer comes in, he might spend a year designing what he's gonna, and you guys would kind of just hang out and not rush into necessarily building the infrastructure. On the other hand, you may decide, let's just get in there and build the infrastructure and finish the subdivision, stub in all the sewer services, because then we can start selling lots. So the short time, you could actually start building infrastructure in July of 2021, if you chose, or you could stretch that out longer. The drawback to that is construction costs will migrate upwards, materials, labor.
So what portion of this is in the River District?
I believe all of what Phil is showing is in the Atlas District.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. So we basically have to have funds from the sale of the previous lots to fund the construction of the next phase.
Or borrow one or
Borrow
another.
it. So we borrow from the River District and then lend to the Atlas District is what we're looking at.
But hopefully we'll have closings on Area 1 and 2, which, part of it falls into the Atlas District where we'll
Right.
get some cash flow.
I'm just trying to look at cash flow versus, borrowing versus timing.
Exactly.
And I should have thrown in the, excuse me, the cash flow model that I shared a few meetings back. But that's one of the things Tony and I have been talking about, how the board will choose to balance that. The other part of the pressure, as you guys know, is getting the lots ready to sell, because if the market stays where it's at, we want to be able to sell those as soon as we can.
Well, I'm sure it's more efficient and cost less to build all the roads and the infrastructure at one time, get it done. So,
Absolutely.
and the engineering at one time for all of it. So.
And get the site looking good, because you can imagine as these homes go vertical over here, and you're going to have completed streets and landscaping and street lights and people wandering around, and then over here we're going to be running scrapers around. And what condition are we going to leave it in?
Mm-hmm.
Do we leave it at base rock, or do we take it through to completion? And then the other advantage to that scenario is then the board can kind of pick and choose what you RFP up here in these other areas.
So Phil, your time frame on this is basically by late summer, early fall is to have the construction to base level.
You would start construction, whether we would push the contractor to start in, let's say he starts in August. There's a fair amount of work there. There's 3/4 of a mile of road, close to 4,000 feet of road in here, water and sewer. There's a massive amount of earthwork in there. And so it could be that work would go August, September, October. You would want to pave in the end of October. You may get pushed into 2022 to pave, which is not always a bad thing if you let it winter over and be the first paving out of the chute in the spring. And then you would do the plantings in the spring of 2022 as well. And again, Commissioner Arman, some of that will be driven by the way that the board feels. As we get closer to this and you see things, and you might say, let's put the pedal down and get this thing done and close it up and be done with it. Or you might say, let's just winter it over and finish it in 2022. Yeah.
Tony, I know you've done a lot of work on the flow of funds. And I just want to, kind of double check on it to make sure that, $6 million is a big number, and, the Lake or the Atlas District doesn't have the funds right now.
Right.
So we just need, and I know we've got the bond for, or the loan for the River District to borrow from.
It'll be a strategic, analysis for the board to decide, how much money we're realizing through property sales versus how much we need to borrow, about how quickly you want to move. So as Phil said, time will help us understand that better as we get into these different budgeting years. In the market, we watch the market. If the market stays hot, I think that'll kind of be another variable for the board to consider. So we'll kind of have to, feel our way through how quickly you want to spend money.
I mean, I think, listening to some of the other commissioners talk, we'd like to move as quickly as possible because the market's hot, but we also have to be able to pay for it all too. So I think that's the balance. We really need to probably have maybe a little more detailed analysis on that, so we make sure that particularly as we start closing these properties, we know the exact amount we're receiving from the sale of the properties.
When will we start seeing receipts from you or invoices start for the engineering if we do all of it?
If we start in February, first one you would see is probably in April.
Yours is the smaller portion of it. I'm not concerned about that. I'm more concerned about when we start
Can
building.
afford the small portion right now.
Yeah, the smaller portion is not concerned. It's when we start getting into the 3.5 million, it's a little more disconcerting.
And one other point to address what Commissioner Arman is saying is, you can phase some of the brick and mortar here, the water line, the sewer line. The board may look at your cash flow and say, gosh, we don't want to build all of it in one fell swoop. Let's build Lumber Lane through to here, and let's build this, but let's not build anything up here. Because this is, great view property. It's always going to be valuable. Or you could do it in just the reverse. Probably not the reverse, because we want to get this stuff down here so we get further and further away from people with construction work.
I would make a motion that we move forward with Phase 2-3 Infrastructure Design Amendment number 20.
I'll second.
Looking for some input from, any questions from our online people?
I tried to second, but I was muted. Dan made me muted.
Any questions or anything?
Sounds logical.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay.
Tony,
Carries.
could you work with Phil and for the next board meeting, I know it's not going to be a detailed analysis of cash flow, but at least start to get a somewhat of a better understanding now that we've approved this, to kind of show how lot sales are going to, flow in, where future sales are going to come into it. I mean, we're looking at 2 RFPs today, how all those are going to come in, and then we already have a fairly good idea what the infrastructure costs are going to be.
And we will do that, Commissioner Arman, because part of it is going to fall out of the master plan update. And you guys remember that was something that we were working on with Heartland. And it will have both the sources and uses immediately, and then it will also have the increment values in it. And so as we are able to get more accurate on our estimating as we start into this next phase on the expense side, but I think we can bring something forward to you next
We're
week.
really not concerned about the increment side right now, because we're not going to have
Right.
any increment to do this.
Yeah. Okay, the next item, and this one is a little bit complicated, and I apologize. But the board may look at it and say, gosh, this has great value and we're very interested in it, or you may say, nope, we don't want to go to that kind of expense. So the area I'm going to talk about here is Area 12. A little bit of background, when we were doing the original master planning, we'd always wanted to bring the shared use path to get people from the shared use path on Southeast Way that Ignite funded as part of your Southeast Way project, to bring people down in an unimpeded way from here down here, not crossing into driveways, Class 1 path, very safe, very nice. And it came down Area 12. When we were originally laying it out, by the time you do that, you're gonna suck up 12, 15, 18 feet of real estate. And that became too expensive for what we thought would be appropriate. And as we were working through the model at that time, so we put the shared use path on Atlas Road. So time goes by, The Douglas property, River's Edge, moves along, and I was thinking about this, and so I got with the city team, Troy, Chris Bosley, Hillary Anderson, and said, would you guys consider floating the idea with River's Edge if he would give an easement on a portion of his property, so we could put that trail partially on his property, and then we could talk to the potential buyers of Area 12, put an easement on a portion of that property, and put the shared use path down there. So you get all those benefits with the walking and bike riding public. This is a 8% grade that comes off of here. So you can imagine your kids on your bike, you're following them down the hill, and they're racing down and they cross that intersection. And they're gonna be zipping right along. And those are the things that, in the line of work I'm in, make me nervous, and people like me and Chris Bosley try to avoid that. Once they cross that one, there's another driveway right there. So we like this idea of a dedicated shared use path, but it comes at an expense. The other thing that could potentially fall out of it, or that would fall out of it, if you move the shared use path from where it currently is on Atlas Road over to the west side of the property, is we would end up adding about 20 diagonal parking spaces there. And I think we all know parking will be an issue of some sort, and folks are going to want to park on this end, get out, walk down, and get onto the trail here. And so picking up 20 spaces there is a positive thing. But again, that comes out at a little bit of an expense. So the idea for the board's consideration is, do you want to authorize potentially $183,000 estimated expense and increase to your current $3.9 million budget in phase one to create that dedicated shared use path and 20 diagonal spaces? I don't know that it's a done deal, because even if the board says today, yes, we want to authorize that additional funds, we still have to go drop the easements, get a meeting of the minds between the folks on the Douglas side, River's Edge, and make sure technically Ignite still owns Area 12. So you could put the easement in, but we don't want to do something that would materially negatively impact the buildings here.
How can we change the envelope of Area 12 if we've already put the RFP out? Don't we have a DDA on that? So we're basically saying we're going to put an easement on their property?
Yes, but in exchange for that, and this was the strategy, they are struggling with parking, to make parking work here, because by the time you not code park a multifamily development, but practically park, they're two different things, right? You can go in and code park something, you meet the city code, but it's not functional for the residents that live there. So when you go practically park it, you need a lot of parking in there. You also have this 1,000 square foot commercial space here that has its own set of parking requirements. What we did as part of the PUD, in order to create a quid pro quo for them with this easement over here, is the city can allocate up to 2 of these spaces over here to count towards that food and beverage space over there. But the only way that these spaces, these diagonal spaces, get created is if we can move the shared use path over here. So we've tried to make it an equitable transaction, is if they give us an easement and we can put the shared use path through there, they would in exchange, Area 12 buyer, whether it's this one or a future, assuming that they complete this transaction, they would be able to satisfy their commercial parking requirements with public realm parking, similar to what a downtown business would do. So we thought that that was an equitable trade.
Mr. English.
Well, yeah, I like that concept, would certainly support it. One of the, we've had to do different trade-offs. One of the ones I'm still disappointed in is that, where Suzanne crosses the trail, way back when, I still think we should have bit the bullet and had an underground underpass. So, this thing is going to, once it's there, it's going to get a lot of use. So I think to be able to separate it off a roadway and really tie it in there, that's worth it. So even though we don't know we can for sure accomplish it, I think for sure we should try.
Good thought.
Yep, I agree with Dan.
So that is also an action item if the board wants to authorize that expenditure or authorize adding to the budget. I think it's a budget item or an action item.
Phil, it seems to me just a little bit premature here. I mean, we haven't even got the easement from River's Edge at this point in time.
You're absolutely right. And so the way that I had stepped through the logic does River's Edge have an agreement in concept? Yes, they do. Does Area 12 buyer have an agreement in concept? Yes, they do.
Okay, so there is more than, there's been discussion.
Yes, I'm sorry, and maybe I glossed over that,
Okay,
Commissioner.
I got the impression that you hadn't had that discussion.
No, we did that because I didn't want to come to the board empty-handed. And so we have this agreement in concept, but now I don't have any money. And so if the board says, and we're not going to give you any money, then we're done talking about it. But if the board says, yes, we would authorize up to our estimate was $183,000 to do this work, then our next step would be to go secure the easements.
Okay.
Because again, we don't want to go spend a bunch of money on design or anything else until I have pieces of paper in my hand securing the easement. And so that would be my next step. If we get that, I would bring those back at the next board meeting. You guys would agree to them in theory, and then we would get on the road with design. La Riviere is obviously chomping at the bit to go build this road, so I'm under a little bit of a time crunch to stay ahead of them because they're ready to go get going on that road. And if we're going to put those diagonal parking spaces in there, I got to redesign that edge.
The proposed diagram up there, the end of that trail, the south end of it, will tie into the existing, or the new trail that we've built.
Correct. And then, just for the board's recollection, that would come here, it would tie into our trail that ends right here, and then River's Edge is going to continue that trail on through over towards that direction.
Then on the north end, it connects to the Celtice multi-use path, right?
It does, and there's a little bit of a tricky alignment up in here because there's quite a bit of a drop off in here, and it won't go straight like that. This is my simple sketch. It's going to have to come up and kind of wind around this building because the grade is so steep through there, and we need it to be safe for the kids, our kid customers.
Speed bumps.
We might.
So,
Get a
and you've got Area 1's right across the street, and so you're going to have the diagonal parking right across from the residential across the street.
That's true, but there's parallel parking currently in front of them. So,
No, and I know there's a parking issue along there, so.
yeah.
Okay, that's just, I'm just looking at the layout from both sides.
Okay.
I think it's worth it to have that connection because then we're connected to the Celtice. I feel like if you have to go on the east side of those buildings, people will just not go. It won't feel like a multi-use path. It'll feel like you're going in front, especially if there's a steep grade. So I just worried that people would stop there. And this way we're connected all the way to Post Falls for commuters. And I just think it's important enough to have that connector be safe and continuous.
I also, this is Commissioner Garcia, I also like the idea of kind of separating that shared use path from a road. You know, sometimes those lines get a little blurred when when you have a path that's right alongside a road, so kind of separating it out. But again, like Commissioner Mendel said, it makes it safer, potentially, and I just like it. I like the idea of moving that path.
All righty.
I'll make a motion that we move forward on the Atlas diagonal parking and relocated shared use path.
Second, Garcia.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, my last action item, and I apologize that I'm commandeering so much board time, but there's a lot of stuff happening here. So as we've talked about earlier, we had the PUD Amendment Number 2, which modified certain land uses and setbacks and different things in the development area. So we need to modify the development standards. One of the big ones, obviously, is incorporating the triangle parcel. And then some of the things we mentioned to you about diagonal spaces on Atlas counting towards commercial uses on Area 12 or 13. Those are in the development standard revisions, as well as what I'm calling tie-down features. Back to this image. the mandatory minimum retail. 'Cause that's now part of the PUD. So to some extent, if the board were to say, well, gosh, we're going to let them put in 500 square feet on Area 13, we would now need to go back and do another PUD amendment. So those were tie-down elements that were part of the, we didn't actually have that before because we couldn't quite get it in there. So now we'll have developments criteria for that, setbacks, what the land use can be in there. On the architectural guidelines, there's an architectural design review committee. It's made up of 2 board members, Commissioner Mandel, Commissioner Metz, Hillary Anderson, Don Veggie, who was the architect that was the brainchild behind this, and myself and Tony. So the reason that just remember to refresh the board's memory that the architectural guidelines are so important is because now we're doing lot level sales in groups of 4. And so this architectural negotiation won't happen anymore. So we could get kind of this crazy variety of homes that may be consistent or may not be consistent with the vision of Atlas. And so the guidelines will give control to Ignite and the city because they're our partner. And Hillary, as you guys know, has been great partner in this, and she has one of her team, Mike Perry, working with us as well. An important component of that is now when I get ready to go think about buying on Area 8, I get a set of guidelines, neighborhood design guidelines, and I can look through them and see, okay, this is what the architectural expectation is. And here's kind of what that looks like. And it's a graphical type document where we're saying, these are not the types of things that we want where we have repetitive looking homes that are just generic. We want something more interesting that has multiple materials in it and showing what are the appropriate uses. Here's another example, garage is front and center. That's not what the vision for Atlas is. It's something more like this, where you don't even see the garage or it's set way back and the house is prominent. It gets into details talking about what roofs are appropriate, porches and stoops. It has a lot of details. They're mostly graphical with written words in them. And this is the kind of the nature of this standard. Pretty easy to understand if you're going to be a buyer in Area 8. So those 2 components, the revision of the development standards and the new architectural guidelines, are now combined into this neighborhood development standards. And that's what we're bringing forward for the board's consideration for approving those. And I know you haven't necessarily looked at them, but I didn't assume that the board would want to be looking at individual architecture. You do have Commissioner Mandel participate in our meeting today, and we'll have more meetings as we move forward and refine these. But we're trying to get ahead of the RFP. So if the board is willing to approve them, then we can get them up on the website.
Phil, do we also have the same kind of standards for the areas 12 and 13?
The entire project has a set of, because
those are more commercial.
They are. We will have architectural, we have development standards for.
I realize that, but I'm talking architectural standards.
The architectural standards don't apply to 10, 12, 1, 2, 13, and 6, because they were in RFP 1. What we have with them is negotiation, because we're still in the DDA process. And so what we were doing today is literally going through and looking at each one of the proposed products in Area 1 and 2 and writing down criteria that we're going to send back to the developer and say, here's what's really great, and here's what we would like you to reconsider. We're also going to send them this document and say, and by the way, you're not subject to this, but here's what the vision is. And so we would like to think that you would take some consideration of it, because everything around you is going to be, that quality and character.
Sounds good.
I would just add that it was a good discussion today, especially on the lots that are waterfront facing, that would be very public facing. And I think Don and his team are really helpful in this, just helping us, for those of us that are not architects, think about kind of the implications and some of the considerations for the rest of the development too. So I thought it was really useful. I really appreciate their expertise. Otherwise, it's just me being judgy.
Honesty.
Honesty.
Good
yeah.
comment. So I guess I'm looking for a motion.
I would make a motion that we accept the architectural and development standards, or now the new neighborhood standards.
I'll second.
First and second, any other questions?
I just wanted to point out that as part of this process, with the declaration being created, under that is a nonprofit corporation that governs the declaration, and that's where the design review committee is it's created pursuant to that declaration. So when we created that corporation, we made 3 board members, or 3 people as board members of that, Tony, Brennan, and Olivia, because of their involvement on the steering committee. And it's actually that board that will approve these neighborhood development standards. We all have a hard time getting that name right, and make them applicable under the declaration. So they're basically adopted as a secondary document under the declaration, which is recorded on the title to the property. So that's how a developer would find, a developer that wasn't involved with us directly would find all the standards that govern the neighborhood, because it's recorded on title. So just so you know, with your approval, we'll then pass it along to that board to make it officially approved and applicable under the deck.
Danielle, quick question then is, where does the housing association come into this mix? Do we form a HOA, or do the homeowners, or where does that evolve from?
So the Atlas Waterfront Association is the HOA that's created under this master declaration.
So
We
that's
did
where
it
it
as a
comes from.
master declaration rather than typical HOA covenants, because there's potential for there to be sub HOAs under the declaration if like a condo association wanted to have their own HOA related to, say what's being built on Area 13. But yes, so all of the governance of the neighborhood on a current basis for construction and then on an ongoing basis for maintenance, like you would see in any other subdivision, is governed by the deck.
Perfect.
And that ADRC committee that met today and is created under the deck, they would govern those kinds of things, right? So if you're not cutting your grass and those kind of things, you'd get a message from the ADRC saying,
Right.
get in line, Mick.
I was curious what the next step was going to be. That's perfect. Thank you.
Right, so right now, because we're the master developer of the whole area, we're in control of the declaration, and obviously we're in control of the board. But over time, we expect that to transition to neighborhood stakeholders and smaller developers. So the Ignite board will not forever serve in that role. And the way we have it set up, we can basically opt out at any point where we feel like the neighborhood is ready to take it over, or our involvement would terminate as the districts terminate.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? All in favor of approving the neighborhood development standards, say yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
I just wanted to pass on the PUD hearing the other night in this very room, where we were doing PUD amendment number 2, and we went through the entire presentation, and they were doing their findings. Commissioner Ingalls gave a shout out to the Ignite board, and he was very impressed with what you all have been doing, and obviously he sees a lot of this, and so I wanted to pass that on. It was very heartfelt, and you guys maybe don't always hear positive things, and so
Very much, appreciate it.
Yeah, pass that on to you. Okay, thank you.
That's the end of my report, Mr. Chairman.
That's it?
That's all.
Board commissioner comments.
Well, I would add something that, again, at our council level, we're dealing a lot, including last night, talking about topic of affordable housing, and that's coming up in a lot of different dimensions, whether it's on newspaper articles about, rent and housing costs, and just that I guess I would want to make sure that we don't have it as an item now or something, but that is in our mix of things that, need to be on the agenda. As we talked, one of the items when we, if I recall, when we put together for the hospital corridor, and was a topic of interest, and I know at the council was, something that dealt with that, that general category, and I really, people have different meanings on what affordable housing means, but I think we all have a sense of, in general, what we're talking about, and so I'm hoping we can at a point have a discussion, maybe some practical options. Something that's crossed my mind is, as we've got the dedicated fund for public art, which has worked well, has produced a lot of things. It won't take care of everything, but maybe some kind of a dedicated fund like that. But again, I just make sure so that the public knows too, that that's, that hasn't gone off of our radar screen, and we need to put some attention on that.
Definitely lacking. Any other board commissioner comment? Hearing none, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to that? Motion carries. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Jeff, that's a wrap.
See you later.